Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk.
Dr. Rapici, how are you today or tonight?
Dr. Falk, I'm really good. I'm looking forward to this talk. It's we're getting close to Christmas, getting a little break.
This
I'm
is the
doing
Christmas
well.
episode. This is the Christmas episode, the holiday season episode.
That's right.
And of course, for Critical Media Studies. And we're happy to be bringing you AI topics.
I don't want to be rude. How are you? How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. So yeah, we're doing a little
Yes.
AI chat this week. And do you want to go ahead and introduce it or?
Yes, I will. Let's just get into it, shall we?
Yeah, let's.
We're gonna talk about Matteo Wong's December 6th piece on Chat GPT with the provocative title of "The GPT Era is Already Ending. Something has shifted at OpenAI." A couple words about Matteo Wong. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic who basically I think he seems to be covering pretty much exclusively AI issues, right?
He's writing a lot about it.
Right.
And there's a lot of Matteo, if you're listening, it's very interesting. And yeah, he's writing a lot of interesting stuff and prolific.
And very prolific. And I was about to say, not just a staff writer, but a very busy staff writer at The Atlantic, Harvard educated, and we're going to talk about one of his, well, obviously the most recent, but also very provocatively titled "The GPT Era is Already Ending," because, and I guess I should also mention before we dig into the essay or go further in the essay, we should also say that I think Michael and I are committed to beginning a kind of new section, a new season, as it were, on artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Then in a way, we didn't realize we were starting the new season when we discussed Benjamin Labatut's essay on Dune in the last episode. But I think we went from Labatut to Wong, and we thought, let's stay in this groove thing for a little bit longer. So certainly in this episode, and I think in the next 2 or 3 episodes, we're going to be continuing to discuss AI.
Yeah. So I think probably as I read the article, there's 2 prongs to this. There's 2 major foci to this, right? One is this notion of the, the title, right? The GPT is ending. So we'll talk a bit about what that means, why that is.
I was about to say that helpfully. Let me set you up here.
Yeah,
I was about to do the helpful setup. I think in pray and hope, it's a helpful setup. Wow, Michael, the GPT era is already ending. My feeling as a layperson is that we're just beginning, that we're trembling at the very beginning of the GPT era. How could it already have come to its fulfillment? What does this title mean?
Right. And then me on the flip side, as the sort of disgruntled writing teacher, is like, the short lifespan of those dastardly little bastard mosquitoes. And thank God it's gone. No, I think that the truth is somewhere in the middle, quite frankly. So anyways, yes, the talk about what that means. But I think the other interesting focus, and this is probably where we're going to end, is this discussion about, well, if the life cycle is this short and if the next iteration works or doesn't, in a way, it seems like Mr. Wong sort of has a slightly, I don't know whether it's pragmatic or cynical yet, an approach that's sort of like, well, the bottom line is the efficacy of these technologies and the actual use of these technologies might actually be secondary. It might not be the primary concern. So
that's where we're going to go to. In my unhelpful way, I'm just thinking of this right now, and I'm curious to run it past you before you begin your survey. Actually, the GPT era is already ending title, which is in bold. That's a little bit of a clickbait. That's a little clickbaity, isn't it?
Well,
Because
so
actually, when I look at the non-italicized subtitle, that's really what we're going to be end up talking about,
you
right?
know,
Something is shifted at OpenAI, and the meaning of that shift is what we're going to talk about.
well, okay, so that opens the door helpfully for where I was going to start with this. I think it's easy to look at and say, ah, clickbait, you got me. But I think if you attend to what he's doing, it's not entirely that.
Okay.
Maybe it's a little flashier than it needs to be, but I think the argument here, and so I'll offer this as my opening salvo. You can respond if you want, and then we'll just sort of get talking about where we are with things. I don't think he's saying, oh, generative AI is over.
He's certainly not. I think
I
he's
think
not.
what he's saying here is that in this case, OpenAI and all of the other, what do you want to call them? Manufacturers, designers, creators, researchers
Sure,
behind
sure, sure.
generative AI,
Yeah.
that the model that underpins GPT
Has shifted.
is ending.
That,
And
oh
that,
yes, right. That's ending, and
right.
something else is
And
emerging.
so
Right, right,
it's
right.
clickbaity in the sense that I can't speak for everybody, but I think this is probably fair. When I think of generative AI from, my sort of little perch in the classroom, I think of Chat GPT, right? And to say, okay, what's happening is we're moving away from the model that powers GPT and into something new. And that's why it's ending. But yes, clickbaity. So, anyways, I think the best way to start with this is probably to talk about what is the model behind GPT that is ending, allegedly, and then what exactly is it that we're replacing it with?
Dr. Apici has the football and he's running down the field.
And
I am not in the way.
the likelihood that he steps on his own
I'm not,
foot
I'm nowhere
is
near this.
high. Um,
Let's do it.
so okay. So the way that Chat GPT is a language learning model, right? That and the way that it and all the other generative AIs like it work is that they are fed these massive, like unmanageably large sets of writing to analyze. And essentially, what it does is it learns what words belong next to what other words and in what order under various circumstances. So it's really, they're learning like the history of the written language. And in that way, when you query the AI, it looks at your question, it analyzes those words, and then it gives you back a response that it feels most closely mimics what has been written about that before. Does that sound fair?
Yes, it does.
And so, in that regard, it's mimicking writing, previous writing. So, what it produces looks like writing. It looks like conscious thought. It looks like intelligent thought. I don't say conscious. It looks like intelligent thought. And we get into this idea that I'm speaking or conversing with
A
something that
consciousness.
is
Yeah,
intelligent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when I get a response that I don't like or a response that's not satisfying, I can requery that uh, AI and it will take the original question into account and it will add the second question and it will essentially try again. And so that is the model of ChatGPT. And what Mr. Wong is writing about here is he's saying that Open AI has pivoted to a new model, which they're calling O1. And the difference between O1 and ChatGPT, or well, I'm just going to refer to them all as ChatGPT here, is that supposedly the new AIs are capable of reasoning. And so what's happening and there is somewhere in here he talks about like the difference between if ChatGPT understands a grammar of language, what's supposed to go where,
Mhm.
that this new AI, this O1, is able to use that grammar. And so basically, there's a lot of talk about like rats figuring out a way through a maze. What the new AIs supposedly do, because he's pretty clear this is still a carefully guarded secret, but what seems to be happening is that it will look at what's been written and what it comes up with, and then it will check back and forth. So it's sort of like a lab rat going, well, this one didn't work, that one didn't work, this one didn't work, that one didn't work. So it takes a little bit longer because in that time, the machine is thinking, as it were. There are problems with this, though, limitations with this, right? So in that way, the argument is that these new AIs are able to think and reason, but there are limitations, right? And the limitation, I think the big limitation, and this is why one of my favorite quotes in here is Wong quotes Emily Bender, who's I think the one who came up with the stochastic parrots, right? Like the idea that we're just responding to what we've seen before. That's not really thought. Um,
But
the
AI is,
the
right?
AI, excuse
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
yes. So this is here's a line. I'm going to read a few little sections from this here. Another way to think about the distinction between language models and reasoning models. OpenAI's attempted path to superintelligence is defined by parrots and rats. ChatGPT and other such products, the stochastic parrots, are designed to find patterns among massive amounts of data to relate words, object, and ideas, right? So that's how the ChatGPT works. It's looking for patterns that have been established, right? So this word's supposed to come next to this word, et cetera, et cetera. O1 is the maze solving rodent designed to navigate those statistical models of the world to solve problems. To use a chess analogy, you could play a game based on a bunch of moves that you've memorized, but that's different from genuinely understanding your strategy and reacting to your opponent. So the thing here that looks like thought, but that isn't, is that these AIs, the O1 AIs, are still completely ignorant of current context, current situation. It merely has the
Of course.
query or the
Right,
problem in front of it.
right.
What it's able to do now is just run through massive data sets of what's been done
Quickly and more data and more
more and
quickly
more and more, right?
and more
So
quickly.
what it
Yeah,
says O1's improvements are constrained to specific subjects where you can confirm whether a solution is true, like checking a proof against mathematical laws or testing computer code for bugs. There's no objective rubric for poetry, rhetoric,
right,
or
right.
emotional empathy with which to train the model. That likely makes O1 more narrowly applicable than ChatGPT 4.0.
So, okay, I don't want to interrupt you when
No,
you're
I'm
at a
good.
point. Let me add something directly. Okay, let me add something directly to what you just mentioned. Um, I'm going to add two passages because I'm going to, that was wonderful. You took the football all the way into the end zone. Here, we're doing some
We're in
FSU
trouble
metaphors
when we're
here.
using football for.
I know. Where does that coming from? But I wanted to add something to, I wanted to add two quotes from the essay,
Yeah.
quotes that kind of flesh out what you were referring to as limitations. And I would say, so I'm going to add a couple things to that, a couple descriptors to that. Uh, the limitations
And we're
have to
talking about the
do,
limitations of O1, right? The new. Okay.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. We're talking about the limitations. And I'm going to redefine the limitations of O1 and talk about them as qualifiers on this notion that O1 is intelligent. So, okay. So I'm going to give two examples. One is directly related to the passage that you mentioned, which is, and it's here. There's no objective rubric for beautiful poetry, persuasive rhetoric, or emotional empathy with which to train the model. Now, right there, we're that's a major qualification on the claim that artificial intelligence
Is
is,
intelligent.
is intelligent because it's mentioning that three things, and we can multiply it, but in those three areas, poetry, persuasive rhetoric, emotional empathy, if you associate any of those fields or cognitive capacities with reason or thinking or intelligence, what Wong basically tells you is that the designers know that the training, this more persuasive, more expansive training that you're talking about or capacities that you're talking about, they we're still there's a big gap between that and intelligence. So that's the first thing. And let me just add one more passage to it where it's another qualifier
Mm-hmm.
on using the claim. I'm trying to put quote marks. One of the things I got from not just Wong's essay, one of the things I sort of took from Wong's essay, but also from Labatut was a kind of, and I think this is kind of in the spirit of what we're doing this episode and what we were doing last episode, is that we were trying to put scare quotes around intelligence and talking about AI. And I think Wong is putting scare quotes. So that sentence puts scare quotes around intelligence, and I wanted to add one more to it. And this is directly related to what you were mentioning about the lab rat tendency of O1 to
Right.
keep on going up and down the maze until it finds the right way. And then here's how Wong very subtly but interestingly describes this process. Like I said, I want to emphasize the gap between this description of the real capacity of AI and intelligence. O1 might not deeply understand chess strategy so much as it memorizes and applies broad principles and tactics. Well, understanding is one of the capabilities of reason and language. So if we're talking about an intelligence without understanding, we're we have to put quotation marks
It,
around intelligence.
it's not, yeah, it's not a compelling definition of intelligence.
Exactly.
But, but, and this is something that just occurred to me as we were talking about this. I think it depends on what you want to do and what you expect out of these technologies, right?
Mhm,
So if you think about it, right, the
mhm,
O1 falls short with beautiful poetry, persuasive rhetoric, and
mhm,
emotional empathy,
mhm.
right? The three hallmarks that drive business and growth. Read the sarcasm there, right? This beautiful poetry, persuasive rhetoric, and emotional empathy don't drop bombs, right? They don't build skyscrapers. They don't drive profits. They just don't. Okay. So
Yeah.
from so I think that what and this used to drive me nuts. This discussion about multiple forms of intelligence and sort of the slipperiness of the entire concept. And I think probably still would drive me nuts if I spent a whole lot of time thinking about it outside of this. But I think that there are still certain industries, certain applications
Mhm,
that are fine for this because,
mhm.
quite frankly, they don't need beautiful poetry, persuasive
Of
rhetoric, or
course, of
emotional
course, of
empathy.
cose.
And if it
But in
functions
which,
out,
yeah, go
if
ahead.
it functions outside of those, if it can pass the sniff test outside of those,
Mhm.
right? Those aren't the sort of goalposts to continue the football analogy here. Those aren't the sort of goalposts to clear. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's got other jobs. And the thing that I think was like one of the things that got me, and this is just cynical and pragmatic simultaneously, right?
Hmm. Mhm,
So I'll read this to you here. This is a little further down. A company blog boasts that an O1 model scored much better than most humans on a recent coding test
mhm,
that allowed participants to submit 50 possible solutions to each problem.
mhm,
But it only did so when O1 was allowed 10,000 submissions instead. No human could come up with that many possibilities in a reasonable length of time, which is exactly the point. To open AI, unlimited time and resources are an advantage that its hardware grounded models have over biology.
Mhm.
So, this is a brute force approach to
Right.
problem solving
Right.
that mimics intelligence because we have a problem and it produces a solution,
Right.
and it produces a solution more reliably than its human counterparts do. Right. The problem, and this is something that when we were talking about Labatut, I don't recall your exact words, but it was really fantastically phrased. And so if you're listening and you haven't listened to the Labatut episode, the one that we recorded just before this, it's definitely worth it to just go back and listen to Barry tell you what the
Uh-huh.
value of language is beyond just the signifier and the signified, right? It was this that what language does is intersubjective. It's irrational at times. It's shocking and surprising and unpredictable. In other words, there's a use case for language, which shocker falls in with beautiful poetry, um, persuasive rhetoric and
Right.
emotional empathy. There's a use case for language, and not a small insignificant one by any means. Like the core of communication among humans, right, is this inarticulate, messy, unpredictable, irrational thing that these models cannot reproduce. And the inability of them to reproduce, as much as I was just making the argument that, hey, it just depends how you want to use it, this leaves a massive hole that is really wide open for exploitation when you realize that in order for these to work, they have to be tied to some sort of intrinsic truth. They have to follow along rational guidelines. It has to be predictable.
Mhm. Mhm.
That makes them inherently flawed if you are looking for something that is legitimately intelligent.
I'm going to, I have nothing to add to that if you wanted to move on to our next bit, but I could add something if you have a moment. I don't want to interrupt the flow.
I'm not going anywhere, Barry. I'm
Okay.
good.
I just want to return, thank you for the fulsome compliment about language, what I said about language, though I think I was just following Labatut's lead because he was sort of pointing toward capacities of language and of reason and really of consciousness enabled by language that are models of the mind, or particularly the models of the mind that he was discussing in his essay, but also the model of the mind working, behind Sam Altman, and that Sam Altman is using in the developing of Chat GPT. So I think I was just following Labatut's lead, but while you were talking, I thought another way of thinking about it, and maybe a better way of thinking about it, is that there's a kind of inbuilt excess in language, a surplus in language that allows for these different efficacies and capacities that you are enumerating. And that too, really, that surplus is what's not available to artificial intelligence. It's
Mhm.
really that surplus.
And I don't really, obviously, I'm not a computer scientist. This isn't what I know, but I find it hard to see how you could take what you're, I think a surplus is a good word for it, how you could take this surplus, this excess,
Excess, yeah.
this sort of extra algorithmic stuff,
Right.
and
Wonderfully put.
and fold that in,
Right.
because the bigger problem that you have with it is not only is it there, but it's dynamic. It shifts. It's a moving target that, so they talk about, Wong talks about how Apple realized that you can confuse
Right.
these AIs if you include information that is not specifically relevant to the prompt. And he uses the
Right.
example of
Right.
like a math problem involving, food. And if you include that you're going to sell excess food, then it screws it up. These sort of slippery excesses are not ever going to be applied in the same, like over a period of time that they're recycled in very different irrational, illogical ways. I mean, just I'm really referring to slang or jargon at this point
Mhm.
that would
Yeah, right, 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 right,
absolutely
right,
stymie these algorithms.
right.
So so I guess the question then is, if they're not really intelligent, if the language learning models, the GPT version of this, has ceased to improve, right? It would appear that the database that fuels them, right? The data that they've been trained on has essentially been exhausted,
Right.
right? We've now just got this massive trove of language that it's assimilated and it works for. Um, and there are obvious limitations to the O1. So what's the deal? Why do it? Because it's not cheap.
But that seems to be the reason at the end. I think we get the reveal at the end of Matteo Wong's essay. And I think the reveal suggests that it's precisely because it is not cheap that we seem to be investing in it. Because, well, do you want to
Go ahead.
mention that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Shall
Because
I go on?
I need to think about this. So I'm not sure what to do with his take on this.
Really? Okay. Well, to me, when I read the end of this particular essay, short essay, I felt this was the reveal because I was asking the question that I think you very well phrased, right? Go ahead and recap that question because I think this passage to me, I read it as the reveal. I read it as the kind of answer. Like,
So
why, considering
why would we consider to pour massive resources into a technology that is not terribly reliable, has already shown signs of stagnation, and has massive limitations?
hold that thought? Because I think that Wong uh, gives you the answer at the very end of the article. I'll start reading. Quote, and here he's quoting Chen. I'm not exactly sure. Let me see. Oh, bear with me, everyone. Mark Chen. He's quoting Mark Chen, who he's quoted a couple times during the article. And this is a quote from Mark Chen that he returns to that he turns to at the end of the article. And like I said, I read this as a reveal. Chen
Chen,
writes or
we
says,
should just say Chen, who is the senior vice president of
senior vice
research at
president.
OpenAI.
Thank you. Uh, and so this is part of the interview that Wong, the research, the interview basically that Wong conducted. Quote, there are now two axes on which we can scale, unquote, Chen said. Training time and run time, monkeys and years, parrots and rats. And now this is Wong. So long as the funding continues, perhaps efficiency is beside the point. Well, before I go, I'm going to read a little bit further, but already there, I feel I'm getting the reveal. The reveal is when I read words like scale, when I read a phrase like, so long as the funding continues, efficiency is a cover for funding, for continuing the funding, for scaling up. Because one of the reasons is the typical one of the reasons why why we're going to continue to throw money on it is because it's profitable to throw money in this particular thing. And in fact, in this case, the more money you throw, there is the capitalist understanding that there's going to be uh, a bigger payoff.
So
So let's keep on spending the money.
help me
But I
here.
should, but I should, shouldn't I finish the
Go
rest
ahead,
of
go
it?
ahead, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Um, Let me just return to the quote and then let's talk through it because I think this for me is kind of the cap of the essay. And so I think we're at the terminus point for the discussion. The maze rats may hit a wall eventually too. In OpenAI's early tests, scaling O1 showed diminishing returns. That superintelligence could use so much electricity as to require remaking grids worldwide. Did I read that slowly enough so you can take it in?
Oh yeah.
Everyone can take it in. That super intelligence could use so much electricity as to require remaking grids worldwide. That's what scaling up means, right? And that such extravagant energy demands are at the moment causing staggering financial losses are clearly no deterrent to the startup or a good chunk of its investors. It's
I
not just
mean,
that OpenAI's ambition and technology fuel each other, ambition and in turn accumulation supersedes the technology itself.
let me just right before this, let me just throw this on the fire as well here. Not even 2 weeks after the launch of the O1 preview, the startup presented plans to build data centers that would each require the power generated by approximately 5 large nuclear reactors, enough for almost 3 million homes. That is each data center requires this. So here's my question, and I could this could be highlighting the 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 extent of my naivete here. Okay, this to me, this whole enterprise to me, at this point, I get starting it. I totally get it, right? But this feels to me like a modern day Tower of Babel. This feels like the pinnacle of hubris to me, right? There is a profound, a staggering amount of power required to make these work and to make them work at a very inefficient level.
To
The
make it
amount,
work, that's really crucial what you just said. To make it work at an inefficient level.
the amount of energy required, the amount of money
And
required,
right,
the
right.
damage to the environment,
Environment.
the infrastructure. I mean, I hate to say this, man, but it's like I almost feel like going and calling up James Crary and saying, "Hey, let's get a drink and talk."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that for what? You don't want to write your term paper? Jesus. Now tell me where I'm missing this because to me, this very much seems like not just the project of a man, but of an industry that is indifferent to some very human, very real problems.
Mhm, mhm.
And basically saying, screw it, I'm doing this because I can. I don't need to demonstrate value. As long as I can get these wheels to turn over, as long as I can show that, you know what, the rat got out of this maze. Isn't that amazing? If we feed it enough information about the Golden Gate Bridge, it can tell that you're talking about the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, I really struggle to understand how this is a thing at this stage in its development.
How can I add anything to what you said? Let's use the Tower of Babel metaphor. Uh, we're going to end, I think, the holiday episode. I mean, have to do it. I mean, this is going to be the hard Marxist moral here. I have nothing else to say for this holiday episode. Uh, I think this is Tower of Babel like hubris, but the only difference is um, it, it's capital irrationalism. It's not even technology anymore. It's not about technology. What I felt when I concluded this essay is it's not about technology. Not only is it not about intelligence, it's not about technology. It's not about humanity. It's not about resources. It's not about efficiency. All these are cover stories. And the idea of artificial super intelligence is perhaps the biggest, most mendacious cover story for hubris that is so like the Tower of Babel story, but in this case, it's generated by global financial it's in league with global financial capital and the circuits of global financial capital. And it's a really, really unstoppable force. It's a really, really huge, it's a juggernaut.
It is, but see what scares me about it. Like, and I don't mean to, well, I'm just going to say it. What scares me about it is you put a technology like Chat GPT or O1, I don't care, out there, and you say, look, this can, here's your scare quotes, right? Think for you, right? The every industry is picking this up
Right.
everywhere. And we're picking it up as a promise that it's more efficient, that it's quicker,
Exactly.
right? It is,
Exactly.
as you said, it's the giant lie, right? So what happens? You got students using this to write their papers. Okay, you're not learning anything, right? You've got uh, companies using this to direct traffic here or there. It's great in a yes no loop. When a
Right.
human concern pops up, right? You're gonna send it gibberish, and now we're responding to human concerns with gibberish. You know, um, I
You
think
were
that
telling me to look. Oh, go ahead. Finish your
well,
point. That
I just
that's
think that
something
what
you,
this
you
is
pointed out.
doing in a world where we are already way overstressed and
Mhm.
way overstimulated and way overpulled in a million directions. This is the great pharmacon, which promises us an answer that fully lacks humanity
Mhm.
to a fundamentally human problem of connection.
The pharmacon is more honest than this because the pharmacon is a medicine and
That
there are
does cure.
always warning labels on the medicine. There's always these warning labels, right? I mean, you can have warning labels on medicine that if you reuse it, that if you use it improperly, it's going to be fatal for you
Even
and
if you
it
use it
will not.
properly, even if you use it
And even
properly,
if you use it properly. This just strikes me as hucksterism, as the rebranding of certain terms and values as a cover story for money making, a con
see,
game, a shell
see,
game.
it is, and but I think to get back to it, what's disturbing to me, and then I am going to shut up. But what's disturbing to me is that I think, as I said earlier, if you put something like this in the right context, it could be
Mhm.
profoundly useful, right? But
I wanted to I have a comment. You said that earlier. I want you to finish off the thought, but I had a thought. I had a response to you made this statement earlier,
yeah,
and I didn't say
I
something.
guess what I'm saying is I believe I'm not sitting here,
Mhm.
um, as some sort of like mouth breathing troglodyte who's just,
No,
just
right, right.
right. There is a use for these things. I'm certain of it. But I think what frightens me is that it has been applied and marketed and sold to us as this, this cure all, this
Right, exactly.
and it's
Exactly.
it is dangerous in places where it doesn't fit. And I think likening it to true intelligence, right? Chasing it down as true intelligence, marketing it as some sort of human interface
Mhm.
is really, really bad.
Mhm. Yeah, that well, you went to where I was about to mention this earlier when you talked about the efficacies and uses, and you're absolutely right. I don't want to sound too much like the old man yelling at a cloud here, because I can see many particular uses in many vocations and in certain fields of endeavor where this is really a breakthrough. But what we're really talking about are the hype. The hype is unbearable. And so, two things. The hype is unbearable uh, because the promises in the marketing are way off the chart, way off the scale from saying, "Hey, do you want to be able to write your X report quicker than you would have done it ordinarily?" I mean that, in other words. who can disagree with your claim, Michael, that this is going to be the AI is a practical benefit? But it doesn't get sold or packaged that way. It's like, oh, we have a practical time-saving solution. This is being praised as a second coming, or actually not the second coming, the first coming, the emergence of a singularity. And let me go to something that you pointed out that I wanted to respond to at the end of our pregame talk last week. You told me to go look at Gemini ads for Google's
Yeah,
AI,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, there the marketing was very simple. It was like there, uh, I think that's the ultimate in hucksterism. There, the solution to every one of life's problems
Yes, yes.
could be AI. So in other words, we wouldn't have to have this episode. Matteo Wong wouldn't have to be writing what he does. We wouldn't have to have this discussion if it was a matter of technology, if it was a matter actually of scale, to use that word, if it was an actual matter of scale, if we had a practical technology that we were using to more and more practical advantage, right? I mean, we would not have an episode here. But the problem is Gemini, Google. I look at that and I see that in every walk of life, for every person imaginable, for every class, race, gender imaginable,
Absolutely.
we have a use, and a use that basically is encouraging a substitution for human interaction.
Yes. Yes. This is who or what you can just sit and talk to.
Its promise is a substitute for the human,
Yes.
which far exceeds what you're talking about, which is absolutely unobjectionable. And in fact, we could even praise it to the skies. The stuff you're talking about in terms of the practical shortcutting, this is why humans like technology from the very beginning.
Yes.
Saving time, creating leisure, creating time to do other things, integrating more and more activities, efficiency, old
Mhm.
school efficiency. These are, I mean, we're not contesting those values. Let's make that very
Yep, yep,
clear.
yep.
We're not yelling at the cloud and saying, I hate efficiency. But the problem is the hype is real. And the hype is getting more. Here's the other thing, Michael. What alarmed me about the Gemini ads is I felt, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe this is the old man waving his fist at the cloud. But what I felt is like this is the start of the hard sell. This is not the end of the hard sell. We're going to get more and more of this hard sell.
Oh yeah, no, that's the preface,
That's the
right?
preface.
Because this is
It's
just
not
now
the
starting.
terminus of it, right?
No,
Yeah.
this is just now. Look, this
Yeah.
is just us out the gate, but you've now got a friend.
You've now got a friend, and you're promising a lonely populace, an ever more lonely, withdrawn, isolated populace, the promise of a new friend.
Hmm.
Dangerous stuff.
Yeah, not
Dangerous
a.
stuff.
It's the good news. The good news, and I feel like we should end with good news.
Let's do it.
It,
Happy holidays.
happy. It seems unlikely that these are here. That these are going to kill us.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that's
But
good. But
but
but they could. But they could. I don't want to get too far in front of us. But no, I think that the good
well, I
news.
mean, well, well go ahead. I want to add
No,
to the good news. I want to add to the good news. No, I'm going to add to it
go.
for the
Yeah,
end.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I do okay, so I fairness in advertising. I do think there is bad news here. And the bad news here is I agree with you. My fear is that the hard sell, the scam, as it were, um, is on,
And we're buying
and,
it.
and we're buying it. And so that's the bad news. And I feel that's bad, scary news. Okay, but let's end with good news. Here's what I've got. Okay, so this is a good place to end because this summary statement encompasses Wong and Labatut for me. Because to me, I read and we encourage. Michael, am I right? I think we encourage folks to. We should have a link to the short essay.
Yes, and I linked to the Labatut in that
And
episode.
yeah, so we'll make that available. Um, I found it really instructive and helpful, or whatever, instructive, to read both of these essays together. Because one of the things it did do in terms of good news is it kind of deflated my fear of the big bad howl in the sky, the big bad AI that was going to come down and bite me. And the idea that the AI is going to take over my life and destroy everything, or destroy the world. Um, this idea that technology is going to take us over, and because it's so singularly intelligent, it has no choice. The Matrix scenario, and maybe that's even the best scenario, that AI, as soon as it emerges, realizes that humans are stupid and they have to take over humans and use humans as food. The science fiction scenarios strike me as science fiction fantasy scenarios. So that aspect, I mean, I think both Labatut and Labatut, of course, Matteo Wong is working in a short form, but Labatut's essay, by giving you the history of machine thinking and how humans think about the mind as a machine, by giving you that history, also, I think, kind of takes away some of your fears about the singularity happening, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it pokes holes in that.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
certainly I don't ever want to rule out the possibility of a phenomenal crisis, but
Well,
that's
I
not for
think
now.
phenomenal. Well, now we're getting back to the negative note. The phenomenal crisis is already here,
Yeah.
right? So I'm
I mean,
not ruling that out.
the existential
Yeah.
crisis, the one that ends us all.
Okay.
Um, well, let's let's end there.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Um, just a quick note to all of you guys who listen. Thank you so much. It's been exciting to watch the episode grow, or excuse me, the episode,
Or the episode too.
the episode can grow. Just to watch this whole little project of ours grow, and thank you for listening, and for those of you guys who are writing in, thank you for that. We've gotten some interesting feedback on these, which has always been
Oh,
interesting.
we should say that, okay, this is the place for meaningful end of season
Yeah.
reflections, and I second everything Michael said, and would add my own heartfelt thanks for your support, and thanks for your comments, happy and sad, glad or bad, mad or bad, whatever. It's great to have feedback. It's great to have your interest, and we're going to try to keep it coming.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all in the new year.
See you in the new year, Michael. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Critical Media Studies podcast. To find out more about the show, check out our webpage at criticalmediastudiespodcast.com.